have a male on the line saying he wants to die and that he killed someone.
The 911 call coming in after 3 a.m. in the morning of May 24th. The caller, 24-year-old Ethan Hunsaker, is back from a Saturday night date.
They just met on Tinder that night, had gone out for some drinks, and it ended up back at his house where they planned to watch a movie and spend some time together, which they did.
Police say his date, Ashlyn Black, fell asleep at his house.
And at one point he woke up and for some unknown reason, completely unprovoked, he decided that he was going to kill this young woman, and he did.
When officers got to Hunsaker's house, investigators found Black's body with multiple stab wounds.
Blood on the floor, looks unconscious.
Hunsaker allegedly told police he choked and stabbed Black. He was arrested and charged with her murder.
But certainly, by his own admission, had some demons that he was dealing with.
Investigators say Hunsaker admitted he has homicidal and suicidal thoughts daily and is on medications for mental illness. The explanation brings no comfort to Black's family. Their statement saying in part, quote, "A monster has taken away the life of our little girl in a crime as senseless as it is evil. Our hearts are broken and our lives forever changed due to the despicable acts of another person."
We haven't had a case like this where complete strangers meet like this. In the time that I've worked here, 23 years, we've never had a case with that, set of details.
I think those two words describe it best: senseless and evil. I mean, how else can you describe what happened here? We've got a special guest joining us tonight from Salt Lake City to talk about the case. Criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Greg Skordas joins us. Greg, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Vinny.
I know you've had an opportunity to actually speak with the attorneys involved in this case, but I want to start on the defense, because from what we understand, it seems like there's some pretty strong evidence here, right? What is the defense going to do? Do we have any idea?
Well, they've sort of shown their hand a little bit in that they have requested what we call a psychological evaluation. The results of that have come back, although no one's disclosing it yet. But there's obviously, even your reporter earlier indicated, there's significant mental illness, and that's not a justification or an excuse, but it may provide at some point some mitigation in this case. The detective from Layton City also articulated that there was a significantly long confession. So it looks like the state has a pretty tight case. But the issue is going to be at what level this man can be punished based on his mental illness.
Well, let's talk about Utah. When you say mental illness and you've got a case like this, a lot of people at home are thinking, okay, insanity defense. We see it in a lot of states in our country, but we don't really see it in Utah, do we?
No, we don't. It's a very tough nut to crack in Utah, Vinny. It's almost impossible. And from what we've gleaned so far from the psychological evaluation that has come back, and although it's sealed and it's secret, it appears that it's probably not going to support, or at least doesn't have enough to support, an insanity defense, perhaps a mental illness defense, but that only gets you so far. It's a tough case for both sides, because the prosecution isn't in a position, Vinny, that they can give this kid a break or a deal at all. Certainly the victim's family wants no part of that. And the defense has a very difficult case with a man who actually called the police and reported his own homicide.
So let's talk about from the prosecution perspective. A lot of times in cases like this, what we've seen through the years at Court TV is sometimes prosecutors will say, listen, this could be a death penalty case. I mean, I could make the argument for a death penalty case. We'll take death off the table, life in prison, let's move on.
The state, for whatever reason, took death off the table at the charging stage. They charged it as what we call a first-degree murder instead of what we could call an aggravated murder, which is a capital offense. So it's a murder to start with, and in Utah, that carries a potential prison term of a minimum of 20 years and what could be for life. So that's the way it's charged right now. I haven't heard anything from either the prosecution or the defense that there's some sort of a bluffing or posturing on the part of the prosecution to make it a death penalty case or else. So it's what we call murder one in Utah, which is a 20 to life imprisonment, and I don't see the prosecution budging from that at all.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine going any lower than that. It seems like he's already sort of getting a deal with those particular charges. You know, Greg, a lot of times in cases like this, there's an outcry, there's a reaction that, you know, when you meet on an app or, you know, on a dating service or something, should the app do more? Is there a way to protect people? And from my perspective, Lee, I don't know if there is. You know, we live in a relatively free country. People can associate with whomever they want, you know, through whatever electronic means that they want, whether it's through a dating app or otherwise. I don't know if there's any way to, number one, hold anyone else responsible. I think the killer is the one responsible. But also, logistically, there'd be no way to protect people. Do you think so?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think programs like this, Vinny, can show people that really, when you're going to meet people on apps like this with really no vetting at all, with no sort of investigation, not much at all to know about. I absolutely am not blaming the victim for 1 second. This was 0% her fault. But these apps create situations between young people. I think a lot of people know of Tinder as sort of a hookup app. And, you know, it's just fraught with peril. She seemed to be just a beautiful, sweet young woman. And he's a severely mentally ill man, and they just ended up together. It was just a tragic set of circumstances, and both of their lives will be changed forever.
Yeah, and it's not just, and I'm not just talking about dating apps. We've got trials that are pending involving rideshare apps as well, and it's this rideshare a little bit different. But in this situation, you know, I always like to look at every tragedy that we cover here at Court TV and say, okay, is there something that we've learned from this, and then something that we can do? And I guess if you are meeting someone through one of these apps, you got to stay in a public place and not go anywhere until you know who that person really, really is. And isn't there an opportunity also to use that same technology to kind of find out who the person is that you're going to be meeting?
Yeah, you can do some background check. You can do what you've just described, which is sort of a meet at a public place. I've also seen another effective thing done by people who participate in these sort of meeting services, rather, that they have a friend that calls them periodically. Just have your girlfriend call you every hour or two. Just say, hey, how are you doing? And if you don't get a reply, then do something quickly, or have your parents sort of check up on you periodically. Don't just assume that 24 hours later somebody may come looking for you. So there's a lot of things to do, and I think programs like yours, Vinny, point that out, and I think it provides a pretty important public service.
Now, one other part of all this is a case that we are tracking, right, and we're keeping an eye on. What's the realistic time frame when it comes to, okay, this is when we're going to get a trial?
So listening to your folks from Tennessee a minute ago, they're doing trials there, but we haven't had a trial in Utah since February. And our Supreme Court recently told us that we're not having any trials anytime soon. They may be starting to schedule some November, December. I know trials on my personal calendar are currently being set for April and May. And even that is contingent on some break in the pandemic. Utah's had a significant outbreak recently. Our numbers are way up. They're sort of off the charts. And so we've taken a huge step backwards, and we're not getting either in our federal or our state court, we are not getting jury trials, at least currently. And that may change. And even how we impanel a jury, how we get a jury to all have 8 or 12 jurors, depending on the type of case, sit next to each other in a courtroom hasn't been decided yet. So the logistics here are, I believe, at least months out.
Greg, let me ask you one final question, which is, we've had this huge backlog, your state and states across the nation. What do you think the long-term impact is going to be on our system of justice that we haven't had trials for, whether it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months?
Well, so far the impact that I've noticed is that people are recognizing that there's a problem. Prosecutors are dealing cases. Defense attorneys are dealing cases. Judges are pushing cases toward resolution. We have clients who are sitting in jail. Normally, you would have expected there to be a speedy trial challenge. We don't have that. You can't have that. And or at least our courts are so far saying, well, wait a minute, this is beyond the prosecution's control. But you find that the state is generally recognizing the problem, and we're getting cases worked through the system, at least here in Utah.
Greg Scott, it's great to have you on the program. I'm glad we found you, and please come back.
Thanks so much, Vinny.
All right, folks, and continue to track this case. Preliminary hearing is set for October 28th, 2020, but as you heard from Greg, they're not setting trial dates yet. No trial date set, but when it does happen, you'll hear about it right here on Court TV.